Welcome to Duchenne Science Live, brought to you by Action Duchenne. My name's Neil.
And my name's Sid.
Welcome to our Rare Disease Day special. In this show, we're just going to talk about some of the challenges of rare diseases around care, clinical trials, and also just awareness of the condition. So in Europe, different parts of the world have a different definition of what a rare disease is. So in Europe, a rare disease is one that affects less than 1 in 2,000 people. So in the UK, that probably equates to around about 40,000 people in total, I suppose, for one disease. But then if you look at kind of the total rare diseases, there's somewhere between, say, 6,000 to 8,000 rare diseases in total. And so in the UK, there's about 3.5 million people living with one rare disease or another. So although the diseases are individually very rare, when you look at the total, actually it's a significant number of people that are affected.
Yes, and so hence, if you think, yes, so sort of maybe 3.5 million people starts becoming, that's a significant number. Even if you say within that, the individuals with a particular rare disease might be very small.
Yes.
That's not an invisible cohort of people. No wonder things like Rare Disease Day are important to generate awareness at a much, as you say, sort of a very kind of almost, very simple level. But
I think you were about to say the word. I think you were about to say the word superficial.
I was about to say the word superficial,
and it's absolutely the right word.
Okay.
For rare diseases, if you imagine there's kind of layers of understanding, so if you can get from never heard of it up to even a superficial understanding, that's fantastically useful, because if someone's diagnosed with that condition, when they go and tell their friends that they've been diagnosed, or their child's been diagnosed and they need to tell their family, if those people have heard of the condition, that's one of those massive barriers removed straight away.
Mm-hmm.
That same lack of visibility is one of the big challenges for people who are diagnosed with these conditions. So if you imagine, it's reasonably likely that their family doctor, their GP in the UK, will never have seen a case before. That's just statistics and maths, that there's an awful lot more doctors than there are people living with any one rare condition.
So does that potentially slow down diagnosis? Or
the problem with diagnosis is, well, not the problem, one of the challenges of diagnosis is you've got to know enough about the condition to know which specialist to send the person to. And so people living with Duchenne often turn up to the doctor with motor delays, so they can't run or climb stairs or something like that. If a doctor sees that, they're probably going to know it's a problem in the muscles or the bones or something like that. But then they've got to try and decide which specialist to send that person to. And people living with Duchenne are actually seen by neurologists. It's not uncommon for children to be sent to pediatricians or orthopedic specialists or musculoskeletal specialists on the way to getting to the neurologist who can actually diagnose a case of Duchenne. And so diagnosis, even of quite a common rare disease like Duchenne, can be an involved process.
Equates to a reasonable length of time if you're being sent to different consultants.
Absolutely. If it's a much rarer rare disease, so in Duchenne we think there's around about 2,500 cases in the UK in round figures. Other rare conditions, there might be 100, there might be 200. For those conditions, it's even harder, because now it's almost certain a GP will never have seen a case. It's almost certain that none of the GP's friends or contacts will have seen a case. So they can't go to the doctor next door and say, what would you recommend here? Or they could ask, but it's unlikely they'll know the answers. So the rarer the condition, the harder it is to diagnose often. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is, often lots of people simply don't get a diagnosis. For some people affected by a rare disease, it might be that rare that it's simply not possible to diagnose a specific condition. If you imagine a scenario where you've got, let's say, one person with a disease, a hypothetical situation, you've got a really rare disease with one person. how can a clinician, a clinician can diagnose something on the basis of the symptoms. With genomics, so that's the reading of all the DNA in their genome.
Yeah.
They might be able to find a mutation in a gene that looks like it might cause some of the symptoms. But actually that disease, that's what the person's got, that's what they're living with. But the disease, technically, if you go and read a medical textbook, just doesn't exist. If this is the first case and the only case of that disease, it's basically impossible to diagnose a specific. You can diagnose it as a rare disease, you can diagnose the genetic thing, but you might not be able to put a name to the condition because it might not have one. And so there's lots of rare conditions called syndromes without a name. So you're diagnosed with a rare disease, but it's a rare disease without a name.
Right.
But
and that's a whole different set of difficulties for those living with that.
Absolutely. I mean, at least with Duchenne, because it's got a name, there's lots of information about Duchenne out there.
Well, one could say that being a more common rare disease, as Duchenne is, means that the information available to all parties with an interest, so the patient, their family and friends, everybody involved in treating them, there's just that little bit more information available to them.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at Duchenne, there's an internationally accepted standards of care, which is the recommended care for anyone living with a condition. And it's possible to write that because clinicians have experience, specialists have experience in treating enough cases to work out what the best way to care for these people is. But actually, probably the big challenge of care is your family doctor, this possibly being their first case. And so they're learning with you. And what often happens is the parents or the person living with this rare condition, they become the expert. We see it all the time in Duchenne. It's true in many, many other conditions that the GP might never have heard of the condition. They'll be reading, they'll be trying to learn what they can. But actually, it's the people that are living with it day in, day out become very quickly an expert in what to expect, what's happening. And it's I think one of the challenges of care is kind of getting used to that new relationship almost. It moves away from the doctor being the expert and becomes almost a partnership or the patient becoming the expert. And obviously that's very different compared to what people are used to. It flips it almost entirely on its head. So I think that can be a bit of a challenge for some people. But it's...
Yes, and that's it's a whole new world.
And I think certainly in Duchenne, the other challenge, should we say, is that lots of people choose to take part in clinical trials. It's really important for everyone to kind of keep monitoring health. And so it's not as simple maybe as, just treating someone with a condition where the care is always the same. It's never going to change. Duchenne's really variable, so everyone's care is slightly different. And also you've got the added complexities of people taking part in clinical trials. So organising those clinical trials in rare diseases is challenging as well, just from a numbers point of view. So if you imagine a hypothetical situation where you need 100 participants in your clinical trial, in a rare condition, you might have to have trial sites in multiple countries to find enough patients. 100 might be an awful lot for a rare condition. If you think about something like dementia, 100 patients in a dementia trial would be, a single clinical center could easily recruit that number. A dementia trial, you'd probably want a lot more people. You'd probably want thousands. But that's probably not a challenge within, maybe one clinical center or a group of clinical centers. It's unlikely you're going to have to arrange a global trial to get to big enough numbers, just because there's lots more people living with those conditions. Organising a rare disease trial is a much bigger undertaking. Just finding those patients and bringing the trial to them is...
It's a question of the numbers. You're going to require collaboration across a number of countries across the world, potentially.
Exactly, yeah. And, we've seen some of the big trials in Duchenne. They're global trials. They're in tens of countries across the world because they're trying to recruit maybe 200 patients. And especially when you think, if a trial's going to take a subset, if it's a trial that's looking for people with a certain mutation or a certain age, saying, oh, we'd like 200 people that match these criteria, then it becomes even more challenging. So doing trials in the rare disease field is challenging. There's lots of companies doing them, but it's not as simple as it would be for a condition that's not rare. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, what that means is that it's harder and therefore more expensive to develop drugs in the rare diseases. And you've got the double whammy, of course, that your target market is much smaller. And because of that, there's lots of schemes that help support pharma companies working in rare diseases to recognize the kind of extra work and the extra risk that the pharma company is taking in developing those treatments.
What we haven't touched on is a rare disease day is the importance of community and health and well-being, or sort of mental health, and knowing that other people are in the same boat.
And so there are others who understand, what living with a condition means. And, Action Duchenne, we always try and build this community. We try and help people find other people, to talk to other people.
And from a science and research point of view, that's what we're trying to do here a bit, to provide information on latest science and research.
Because many of these rare conditions are at the absolute cutting edge of science. The gene therapies, the exon skipping drugs that are being developed in Duchenne, these are really at the forefront of scientific discovery. So it's really important for families to understand what's happening, understand how that might affect them or their child in the future, to be able to take opportunities if they want to, to be able to take part in a clinical trial if that's what they want to do, to understand the types of care options available to them. It's all really, really important for families to understand that information so that they can
make informed decisions, feel that they have some kind of control.
Yeah, exactly, so they can make informed decisions and feel like they're in control. Mm-hmm. So I hope you've enjoyed our Rare Disease Day special. We'll be back next week in our normal time slot with another exciting Duchenne research paper. Mm-hmm. And we look forward to talking to you then.
Yes, we do. Thank you.